Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and of course, all of you co hosts on this channel as we talk all things tabletop gaming. And today, we are, of course, talking science fiction. Now, if you've noticed the information or the thumbnail, we are going to talk about genetic fiction. It's something I came up with. It's nothing official. Maybe it'll spread if more people catch on to it. But anyway, long story short, here on Future Friday, we like to talk about science fiction, tabletop gaming, and maybe more loosely story elements and things of that nature. And today we're going to talk about genetic fiction. Um, in light of the recent release, at least here in the States, on FX on Hulu, or I think that's right, or on Hulu, promoted by the produced by the FX channel. Why the Last Man has been released. I believe so far it's been 4 episodes. I'm not sure exactly. The first three were released, and then they're releasing one each week. I don't know what the release date system is. But for those who don't know, Why the Last Man, created back in 2002, was a bit of a adventure series about a young man. His first name is Uric. So, of course, that's where the Y comes from. But a dystopian post apocalyptic world happens when simultaneously every living organism on the earth that has a Y chromosome dies, which essentially means, for lack of a better term, all the men die in the world. Although this also includes all the animals and embryos and sperm and all that kind of thing, and all this includes wild animals as well. And in this series, um, why I'm calling it genetic fiction is, or I guess you couldn't be more accurately, genetic speculative fiction, brings me back to a number of other stories that are have something related to it. Now, of course, today you're going to get it. Gender politics is huge. It gets everybody. Everybody wants to start a flame war. Everyone sees a slice of a thumbnail or a headline, and they get very upset. But one of the great things about science fiction, of course, is the speculation. That's that's kind of the bread and butter of science fiction, where we science fiction is basically like what if, a little plug there for the Disney series What If, but it allows us to think about what happens if a slight variation in the genetics of humanity happens. So I also related in wrote this down in the thumbnail. Sorry, in the doobly doo below the video, in the promo that went out, talking about like movies like Gattaca, one of the best out there. Of course, we have Children of Men, where the last child was born like 18 years ago, and the dystopian future that presents. There's a number of other there are a number of other stories out there that I can't think of off the top of my head. Many of them based on novels, which were turned into movies. I suppose you could shoehorn in like I Am Legend or any zombie apocalypse, but I think we're going to fall more into, say, something like a movie very few people watched called Blindness. Maybe there's a disease out there. There was a low budget but excellently um, uh, conceived movie where a zombie plague, everyone is infected by a zombie plague, but they're not zombies yet. And people have to take periodic doses of a drug to keep the zombieism out of their system. And the 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 vaccine is starting to run out, and people, of course, with money and power and connections, are like hoarding it from the regular population. And there's a young lady, I think she's like a nurse or something, and her husband might be coming down with symptoms of it, whatever. Yeah, Dead Man brings up. I think Dead Man brings up 13 Monkeys. The series from Sci-Fi Channel falls into this category. It Was it called 13 Monkeys as a differentiating it from 12 Monkeys? Was that it? Oh, but I do love this I love the movie 12 Monkeys. I've never seen the series. I've never seen the series. Zombaway, one a day. You're so silly there, Pelora. Okay, so as you guys know, I am of course an armchair transhumanist as well, and I meaning I love to think about those things. And with Why the Last Man coming out, it made me really think about and embrace the idea of world building from it's not necessarily a slight change, but the idea that all the men have been eliminated. So, for example, in the not giving away any spoilers, because Why the Last Man as a graphic series has been out for almost 19 years, almost 20 years now, and I know people who never heard of the graphic novel series, which has, let me see if I can find it, has 60 issues published by Vertigo from 2002 to 2008. I know some people have just found it out and they're like losing their minds about this and how it's, I don't know, gender politics and woke and all that kind of stuff. But I like the idea of like doing something like that, because very easily someone could easily write another story and go, what would happen if all the women died? Right? Although technically, maybe what's the television series Orville? The Orville kind of dealt with it slightly with Bortus, the alien who comes from an alien race where everyone is genetically altered to be male, and so their entire culture is all male, gender, genetically altered, gender specified or something. So I like that. Mike Gould says there are Star Trek episodes around virus kills X age, or culture has no children, or we are clones, where this concept comes into play. And I love the idea of it because with science fiction, of course, it's like it's a playground you get to play with. Now, if in tabletop role playing games, we may not want to have an entire world with this kind of thing. But with science fiction, you could very easily have a habitat, a planet, and a hollowed out asteroid, a specified location where these kind of things happen and how the people deal with it. And on the surface, it might be it might not be that noticeable on the surface, but then when the players delve a little deeper, they may come to find out. Like Star Trek, I remember there was a there's always episodes about this in Star Trek, but there was one where they're like, "Oh, we're glad to have you," and it's like all women, and they need to have more children, so they want to capture all the men. That in the beginning, it's like, "Oh, sure, come on in, have something to eat, sit back, put your feet up," and then all of a sudden they start the evil Amazonians start coming out of the alien species and whatnot, or human species, whatever, to keep the people there, and of course the crew has to escape or something. And there's always that kind of thing. Mike says, and there's a movie that I think is called Perfect Girl, where the zombie virus has become endemic, such that everyone is born with it, and there are treatments to end zombie behavior. There was I mentioned just when we started, there was a movie. I don't know if it was called Perfect Girl. Maybe that was it, where there is an endemic zombie virus. It's a one-way system, right? Like everyone's got it, and they're taking an inoculation against it. But if they stop taking it, they will start to get more and more symptoms and eventually turn into a zombie. But the society has learned to cope with it. So like, there's like kids in high school that are joking with other kids because they're like, uh, they're not as well off, and they're like, "Oh, you're just going to be a walking, a walker, or like you're a zombie head or something like that," because of course their parents can afford to have them inoculated and stuff. Mike goes on to say, there's a campy movie called Hell Comes to Frogtown. Never heard of that. Where fertility in men has been all but wiped out by radiation. This same line comes into play in Fury Road as well. Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, for those who don't know, like in Fury Road, which I love, oh my, Mad Max Fury Road is so awesome. They don't explain anything in that movie, and I love it. Like in the very beginning, the War Boys, which all have the pale skin, no hair, pale skin, and there's hundreds of them. I suppose you could even claim. I'll go with hundreds. It's going to say thousands, but it may be hundreds. And you could tell that one of the main bad guys in the movie has been breeding them with the young ladies that are trying to escape, and he even has quote unquote women cows that are sectioned off just to for breast milk and stuff. It's pretty nasty looking. They never explain it. But what I love is the war boys bowing down before the idol of the steering wheels with their fingers crossed, like V8 engines. Oh, it's a great movie. But yes, when it comes to fertility, there's another one. Oh, The Handmaid's Tale. God, what a depressing show. Anyway, the Handmaid's Tale is another one that I should have brought up, which I believe I put in doobly doo. That is another one that has to do with gender speculative fiction where fertility is breaking down amongst the men, and they need women. They're using women as essentially breeding cattle, and they become the handmaids, and is all wrapped up in this like pseudo religious doctrine, indoctrinated, hyper conservative place called Gilead that's taking over the United States or something. It's a great series. Depressing as all hell. That first the book The Handmaid's Tale is the first season, and then it goes on. Second, third, fourth season goes on from there. But God, it's great show, well acted, a lot of face acting, a lot of hyper focused, um, out of frame, thing with the main actress in it. But oh my goodness, it's so good. Deadman says the series His Dark Materials had one world where everyone over a certain age turned into a pseudo zombie. I didn't know that. Didn't know that at all. Um, Mike says Handmaid's Tale, sex-based Nazi politics all around a false theocracy. Texas. You can say that, sir, from above. Yeah, yeah. I know you've heard. Yeah, I love how. Sorry, side note. I love how people are like, I'm all for freedom, asterisks, except for we all do it, right? We're all just like, yeah, I'm for equal everything for this thing, except for, and then everyone's always got the except for, right? No one talks about the fine print of their beliefs, right? Everyone like, here big bold letters above my head, and then read on the back of the t-shirt. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, yeah. You can't help pay attention because Texas technically is the size of a nation, and operates like one. It's that huge. So yeah, people don't realize that. Like, yeah, Texas is its own country. I mean, it's almost the people Texans treat it like it's its own country because it basically is. It's so big and has so much of its own infrastructure and politics and everything like that. Yeah, it would take me longer to drive across Texas than it would be for me in central Columbus to drive to, I believe, Atlanta, maybe even Florida, something like that. It's huge. Anyway, when it comes to gender speculative fiction as well, like with Handmaid's Tale, with Why the Last Man, one of the cool things I love about it is finding the nuance in it. Like, for example, in Why the Last Man, you have like, of course, all the men die. So now you have an issue of like basically half the population's dead bodies are everywhere. And unfortunately, due to the elimination of all the men dying off in about a 24-hour period, the first episode is great when it builds up the tension because you already know Why the Last Man, what happens in it. But the first episode, it's like shows up on a screen the day before, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And you see like birds falling out of the sky, and pets going crazy, and rats coming out of the sewer, and everyone's just like, what's going on with that? That's nasty, and swarms of bugs and stuff. And then you realize like it's starting to spread from the microorganisms all the way up the evolutionary line quickly. And you realize like power stations are going out, and cell phone towers are going out, and airplanes are falling from the sky, and you realize like, whoa, there's a lot of dudes doing a lot of stuff that if they're gone, a lot of women are going to have to take their place. Now, in then this brings up the case. The show starts to delve into, not very deeply, because Why the Last Man, the graphic series, is more of a travel adventure tongue-in-cheekness to it rather than this television series. But it does deal with the fact that, like, for example, they make a note of when men were around, the women were trying, there was a section of women who were trying to keep their appearance up. Girdles, fingernails, hair done. You got to look perfect, look in the mirror, lipstick. And then when all the men were going, you see women are just like sweatpants, unbuckle, flats, sneakers, hair, who cares, right? And it's like, they don't say it, but it's like, were we, you almost get an idea like one section of the women are like, were we doing this just for the guys? Because fuck that, right? And then the other women are like keeping themselves, you know, um, getting keeping themselves enwrapped in the old culture because they want to bring back the old culture. And one of the so-called antagonists, the bad guys, actually had a good point because, of course, any show filmed in the United States, there's only like 4 states they ever talk about, and that's New York, Chicago, California, and interchangeably Ohio and Florida. Right? You want to come from nowhere, you come from Ohio. They'll pick Florida because they need like storms or something like that. But so it's about New York City, and the acting president is saying, hey, we need to get power back. We need food. We need to protect people. And one lady comes up and is like, we need troops over at and find out if there's power left in the fertility clinics. We need sperm samples. We need we need all of that stuff. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. That's, as much as I hate this lady, yeah, she kind of has a point. My Ghoul brings up Godless, a Western Netflix, which I highly recommend. I do too. Godless is a really, really good show. I think it could have gone a little further. I understand the writers wanted it to appeal to a larger audience. I think they could have gone just a little further. Anyway, Godless, a Western on Netflix, it was 1 season, great storytelling, has an entire town without men who were killed in a mine collapse or explosion. The town was LaBelle. Yes, it's a pretty nasty imagery too when you see like the soft music and the men going off to work in I believe it was a silver mine. Anyway, it was a small town that had big dreams of expanding, right? And all the men go off with their lunch pails and their pickaxes, and they go down into the mine. And then something happens, and then you see the mine elevator, the pulley system bring up and it's just piled with nothing but dead bodies, and all nearly all the men are dead, and all the women still live there. Yeah, it was a silver mine, and they had to deal with the fact of like, there was a faction in the group that's like, all right, ladies, we're going to have to invite some men here so that we can live. And other ladies are like, hell no, like we're fine the way we are. And of course, there's of course the idea of, do you go back into the silver mine? It's who plays what part of a gender role. For example, depending on, because we're talking about science fiction here, in the past, you had to have gender roles because if women gave birth, they needed to be protected to give more births. I know, awkward verbalism there, but you get the point, right? So yes, women. Is it true? What's the dumb thing in the RPG community that, well, women can't be as tough as men and blah blah. Well, maybe it's just because they haven't had the opportunity, but we've seen plenty of examples of women being trained in battle anyway. Viking cultures, Japanese culture, we've seen it in Egyptology and stuff like that. So that's actually that's been disproven. But as the gender roles go, yeah, men go out war, hunting, physical labor, whereas the women are more, have been relegated more towards intricate labor. Maybe like men go out to hunt, but the women divide up the food and cut up the meats and all that kind of stuff and build tents if they travel, if it's hunting and gathering and things of that nature. But flipping the script on that, it all really, gender roles, many of the gender roles are skill based, but in a science fiction world, who's to say that people haven't, in a world where you can choose to do anything, maybe people make a choice, and that choice with our players and how they interact is very important. Meaning, like a society could be based around all women. Like they assembled together and was like, we're tired of men treating us like shit. We're going to go off and become all women. But then how do they reproduce? Is it through exo wombs? Do they need outside genetic material? Are there uh, uh, mechanical ways to change the gender of the women? Are there physically change the gender of the women temporarily, or do they martyr themselves? In Y the Last Man, they had to bring up something that wasn't brought up in the graphic series, and that is women taking testosterone and other medications to become men and live like men. And so while Uric is the and his pet monkey ampersand are literally the last two left with the Y chromosome, there are still people who physically and medically are men in this world. And some people had a little problem with that because it kind of makes Uric, it makes Y not as special. But I think it was a great way to pick that out, like and so all the ones that have gone through their periods of their transformation are like hoarding the testosterone because it's not being made anymore. A lot of the doctors and labs and stuff was shut down, and the doctors are dead. And then they're wearing masks and gas masks and other kind of masks and things like that to cover themselves, because a lot of the women are like taking revenge out on the men. There's like Amazonian tribes that are going around trying to eliminate any last vestiges, like the genetics labs and sperm donation labs and things. And of course, Uric, who's a complete, nearly useless guy, although he does have some skills, being the last man, of course, he's going to be the most valuable individual on Earth. And of course, you have to follow Uric and Agent 355, who the woman that plays Agent 355 is perfect. She is, yes, yes. But anyway, going on, Mike says the gender role thing shown in Godless reflects my own upbringing. The okay, the I'm going to pronounce it. Oh, I'm going to butcher this. Paiute, old woman at the ranch, was like a carbon copy of my own. Oh, you told me how this is pronounced. Um, Mignol, Migmal. There it is. Okay, thank you very much. You knew I was going to butcher it. Uh, uh, anyway, the Paiute old woman at the ranch was like a carbon copy of my own Mi'kmaq mother. Tough, judgmental, hardworking. After divorce, she basically took on both roles. Yes, Paiute, not Paiute. Paiute. Okay, perfect. And you know what? The oh man, she's an excellent actress. She was in. Sorry, side note. She was in the television show. Oh, it went for Netflix, 6 episodes. Wow, my brain just shut down on it. Sorry. It was about a sheriff who is a sheriff on the edge of a res, and he has a tempestuous relationship with the res sheriff and the FBI. And so yeah, it's a really good series. It's really good, and it brings to light a lot about I hope in a positive manner about Native peoples living in reservations in modern day. It's really good series. I think it was 6 seasons. I'm sorry. Anyway, one of the great things about that about taking on different roles, gender roles, and whatnot is like, are some people happy to do so, or are the people in the community? Is it just a lack of population? Are they getting forced into this? And when people lose their minds when their life changes. It doesn't matter how little or how huge the life changes, right? Everybody hates it. Come on, listen. We all have jobs where if you eliminate one or two people doing an important role and then that job function gets passed on to somebody else lower down the line, that person, one of us, is going, wait a minute, you paid this other person more money than me to do that one job, and now I've got to do it and get paid less money. F you, right? But in our heads, we're just like, I need the job, so thank you, boss. you know, and we hate that today. Now imagine a whole society where you have to do that, and also expectations as well. Family, there are there's family expectations. There's looking into the future, like for example in Battlestar Galactica, the reboot of it, the president who was like Secretary of Education or something, she becomes the president of the 13 colonies or whatever, and they have to, of course, escape the Cylons. And one of the crew members becomes pregnant, and she was avidly pro-choice, but society, and literally in Battlestar Galactica, they're counting down the population. The show starts and you see the population and you see the numbers ticking, like tick tick tick, starting to tick down less than 50,000, and she's like, as much as I hate to do it, we're going to have mandatory births, right? And you're just like, and here's a character who was avidly pro, hand in the air, pro-choice, but society, and so much like I've brought up on the channel, this is a separate thing than gender, about like gun control here in the States. Like, I think it's more population centered rather than like a legal gun, hand in the air, because huge population centers, people don't want a lot of guns because people act stupid. You live in a low population area, you're like, man, whatever, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with gender and gender roles and gender politics, and when something comes in and topples over the Jenga tower of that, we start looking around like, oh shit, well, somebody's got to do it. So there are, like, for example, in Why the Last Man, a lot of the women have to like step up, and they have to be military and security guards and blah blah blah, and it's like, and a lot of them, you get the idea that some never ever wanted to be in this position, and others are like, well, hell yeah, I wanted to get an opportunity to, like, oh, wait, I'm going to be a helicopter pilot and be in charge. I was like, yeah, hell, about friggin' time, right? What was it in history here in the States? There was a group called the Wasps, uh, women military organization. I know you guys know it. If you could look it up, there were lady pilots known as Wasps. In Russia, there was women snipers, sniper group as well. I believe in China, there were females, female like Green Beret style special forces agents, and you could go all the way through history and different cultures and time periods and stuff. And I like the idea of that. And of course, since we're talking about science fiction, when you start talking about genetic modification, we have like a person could choose at any period of time to be a particular gender, which brings up the fact of there are lots of people today who've been fighting to be recognized and given respect, simple human respect, to be looked at as the gender they choose to be. How strange and maybe even disrespectful to their struggle would it be for all my pronies out there that technology gets to the point where people start throwing on gender like a pair of old clothes, like a bunch of bro dudes are like, dude, it's the weekend. Let's go get sleeve ourselves in a couple of female bodies and go out and have some fun. And everyone's just like, don't, like, oh my god, like, really, Anyway, Mike Gould says, episode 1 where the grandmother packed gunpowder into Mr. Ward's gun wound and lit it with her pipe is 100% my mom's behavior. Damn, that's hard. Yes, that was hardcore and godless. Yes. Pack a wound with gunpowder and lit it up. Like, holy shit. And of course you get the motherly aftermath of it. Shut up and stop crying, right? Thanks, mom. Yeah, right? Yes, the old motherly thing. And let's talk about some of the verbal behavior in here, right? The idea that not to pick apart your culture there, Mike, but this individual becomes the mom of the community, and everybody considers them this individual mom. And these roles might start to shift around a little bit in a like if we start talking, let's get a little hyper specific. So let's say we're talking about different habitats in the solar system, and each habitat has its own has its own agendafied culture in it. Like people have left Earth and they've gone out to like Saturn and the Oort cloud and Alpha Centauri and like, hey, we're going to live like these kind of people, and they've all decided to do their own thing. There might be people who are there where the players show up and it's like, hey, you better show a lot of respect to the mother figure who lives here. And the PCs might not even understand what you're talking about. Like, what did we do? Yeah, Deadman brings up the WASPs. It's the women Air Force service pilots. Yep, WASP. They were airline. They were pilots, thousands of hours and whatnot. If I'm not mistaken, this was during the Amelia Earhart era of piloting as well. And you also get this idea. This is a strange thing that I find people find odd, but it actually results into simple mathematics. Okay, when it comes to gender, race, creeds, cultures, things of that nature, when people are restricted from doing a thing, that doesn't take away the idea that a population within that restricted group has the potential to be very great at that thing. So it boggles the mind sometimes when people go, like for example, the WASPs as the women, the women Air Force service pilots, the Tuskegee Airmen, and so on, Buffalo Soldiers, and go on and on and on. When it comes to things like that, of course, when people are prevented from doing a specific thing, when they get the opportunity to step up and do it, you of course are going to get a higher population of people who are excellent at that thing because they've been prevented from doing it in the first place, right? If they were able to engage in it's like the idea of like women in the military, and people are like, oh, we can't have that, and people can't fight side by side with men. Well, here's the thing. The only people that are going to do that are the ones who want to do it. And then out of that group, you're going to have people who are exceptionally capable at doing that thing. So yes, you're going to have a spike. You're going to have this rising sine wave of, wow, why is that huge population of people really good at that thing? Well, it's because they weren't able to do it. It's more math than uh capability. It's more like, yeah, of course a portion of the population is going to be good at the thing that you didn't think they'd be good at. Mike Gould says Earth Dawn addressed population issues in multiple cultures. The very Viking-oriented trolls had line marriages where husbands and wives had multiple spouses to allow repopulation. Yes, you could play around with that a hell of a lot, especially if you have something like radiation sickness or some kind of genetic code malfunction, or another one might be maybe people live in a hostile environment in the far-flung future, and they it's necessary for the continuation of the culture to repopulate, and so maybe the people embrace a new manner of reproduction. So it could be very mechanical, it could be multiple spouses, it may be temporary marriages, it may be polyamory and constellation uh, type of things. It may be a strange, like you have to go out to collect genetic material to bring back to the rest of us, and you belong, and these individuals belong to us or whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of different things like that as well. And I do agree, like where you have there's a role-playing game within the Ring of Fire which had fantasy gaming, which had a god that expected men to marry 7 wives and have 7 children with those 7 wives, each woman having 7 children or something. And it was a way to procreate, right? Because the godling had lost so much power that this godling was trying to out procreate the other gods by having a larger faith following or something like that. It's pretty weird, but yeah, that could very well be a thing. And of course, you have people within the culture. Some of them are like, "Yay! I'm glad we have this," and other people are like bristling like, I don't like the way this is. Like, maybe I only want to be with one person. Mike Gould says, reminds me of Glory and the story of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment as well. Yeah, Glory, absolutely. Absolutely. Ooh, we got ourselves a block here. All right, A underscore. All right, underscore says while the real Vikings did not quite go that far, what we know about the relationships within Viking, or should I say, Norse culture, were more open to children being born outside of wedlock. If a woman if a woman had a kid that could not have been from her husband, the husband was still expected to care for the child as if it was his own. You know what? Um, that we tend to think of, especially like here in the States, we tend to think of traditional families, husband, wife, they both create children and they're together. But throughout history, we've had a lot of like cousins and nieces and nephews and how do we say, like, um relationships swept under the rug kind of things, right? Like out of wedlock relationships, but and everyone knows it, but no one says anything about it because you still have to care for the child, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean that's a very common thing as well. And again, when we have standards in a culture, even if that culture topples over because of some kind of like weird shifting in the genders, there are going to be people who are going to be hella for it and hella against it. Even if they don't say anything about it, they may act against it in certain ways, be it like subtly, just from their attitude, or maybe more vocally or even violently against a system that they may feel oppresses them and stuff. And I think there's some places to play around with it. Like I brought up the movies like Gattaca, Handmaid's Tale, Children of Men, which is another one of and Quran, Alphonse Quran, Children of Men. Alfonso Quran. Yeah, in the movie Children, the book. I read the book, but in the book and the movie Children of Men, the last child was born 18 years ago, and you can see the downfall of humanity, and you would think like, oh, well, why don't we all get together and spend hundreds of trillions of dollars to fix it? No, people were still fighting and attacking each other. Although there's a great scene in the movie though about that. Anyway, A underscore says, and if a woman, oh, excuse me, jeez, I'm gonna get back to you, Mike. Says, shit, there we go. Star Trek, The Next Generation, where the very, very tropish Irish refugees yeah, who helped a planet of clones to repopulate comes to mind too. Yeah, very very tropish. But you know that could be a pretty good storyline where a colony of um hey, what's going on there? A colony of individuals who weren't born through regular means, I'm looking at you, Krypton, might have to change the way they do things in terms of having relationships and like maybe a culture eliminated gender roles and is completely asexual, or um, everyone chooses not to specify a gender role because this is the new brand new space version of a woke culture. But now something happens, maybe their genetic material starts to break down, machines start operating very differently, and they're like, we might have to go back to the old ways. And there may be people that are like, I'd rather die off than go back to the old ways, where there might be others that are like, no, maybe going back in time might be all right. Next is Nate. Hey, what's going on there? What's up? I don't recognize the avatar, but I it's vague. But anyway, good to have you here. So referring to troll culture being very Viking, not the concept of line marriages. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. What's going on there? Okay. All right, Bray. Hey, honestly, the whole thing about people fighting instead of helping each other is ingrained in fiction, ingrained in us, as a matter of fact. As a certain professional Australian from TF2 said, okay, long as there's two people left on the planet, someone's going to want someone dead. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's unfortunate too, right? Because you literally, literally, some of these speculative, what I'm calling genetic speculative fiction stories could completely end in 5 minutes by everyone going, someone raising their hand, we have a problem with fertility or we have a problem with deaths or something. And everyone goes, hey, why don't we just stop and throw a lot of money and time and effort at it? Why don't we change what we're doing and literally go, let's solve this, let's solve the bigger issue first and then deal with our animosity later. And God, you just like really like what was it? The movie Arrival, where a bunch of alien spacecraft arrive around the world and all the different countries are trying to communicate with the aliens. And what happens? Communications break down and we're not going to talk to each other and turn off the monitor. Click, 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 click. And you're just like rolling your eyes like, oh my God. And unfortunately, yeah, yeah, there are people that are going to do that. I it's like it's the proverbial seeing the downfall of a society and knowing it's going to happen and just watching it happen anyway. And unfortunately, that's I mean, like today, it's like um, uh, as a person who could give literally two shits what gender you want to be, and I say that in all the warmy lovey things. I could care less what you how you live and what it literally affects me not at all. So do I believe in personal freedom? Hell's yes, to the point that F me and my attitude if I don't like it, kind of thing. And too many people are just like, yay, I believe in something with a big asterisk next to it because they have a lot of, well, I also, well, yes, but, well, well, see, in this situation, I wouldn't approve of. And there's a hell of a lot of that. Yeah. Yep. Uh, Bray says lots of societies in fiction wouldn't even survive up to the point they existed in if they were behaving like that throughout their history. Are you talking about us today? Yeah, I mean, hey, that's a big thing in a Fermi paradox, right? Well, let me leave this up here because one of the things Bray's talking about is the fact that how easily, like in Why the Last Man, like in Handmaid's Tale, like in Children of Men, how people just devolve into war and battle and hoarding and a shit ton of like depraved behavior. And if we're holding on to society paper thin like that by a thread, you're right. How would you get to a high level of society if people were just like attacking each other? Now, I will. I'm gonna fight you a little bit and say that unfortunately, war has a habit of advancing has technological advancement as a side effect of battle. World War One was a war that advanced our technologies worlds ahead of what it was before World War One till afterwards, right? I mean, there's things we still have today that came from World War One, like baby formula, because they needed to find foods that could give dump tons of calories and nutrients to soldiers and things like. I mean, you could go on and on and on. So I'm going to fight you slightly on that one. While I'm on your side, unfortunately, war. Now, I think population has a lot to do with that, but hell, I think there's statistics that in World War One, upwards of 60 million people were killed, and we're still around. We still like to procreate. So I don't know. I don't know. That's a hard one to get past too. The idea that people just break down into these animalistic behaviors like immediately. I remember way back in 2020 where we had the toilet paper shortages. I'm still suffering from that. My M Squared says I'm still perplexed by many of the post-apocalyptic raider gangs in games like Days Gone, The Last of Us, yep, Mad Max, etc. Absolutely no idea what they'd eat without organized agriculture. Yeah, like literally. You know what? I've you come on. You guys are armchair theorists just like I am, and I guarantee you that you guys have thought about what would happen if the end of society happened. meteor strike, nuclear war, EMPs, plague, or something like that. And I've thought about like I would go get seeds and stuff. I'd get books on medicine. I would like there's a ton of different things. Or you're just like, what are you fighting over? You know you could plant food. remember way back in the day when people used to plant stuff? Yeah, you could, and guess what? You could take the seeds from the thing you planted and do it all over again. Yeah, you are absolutely correct there, M. Michael Maron's like, yeah, but I guess it's suspended disbelief. Yeah, of course. I mean, come on, Mad Max Fury Road. You had what, probably thousands of people living in that dust bowl of area with a person with a big old switch that could dump water on people randomly as he as he's giving it to them like a god, and you're like, how did he get a water tube up there like that? But of course that you're just supposed to believe that's the way it's supposed to be. Let's see. Bray says, "Oh, I absolutely agree with that. My problem with these, with those societies, is that there seems to not to be not a single rational person within them." Yes. Now that's a trope. I agree. That's a trope that I find annoying. That there isn't, just as much as there'd be violence and animalistic behavior, there would be people who are rational going like, raising their hands like, could we collect all the doctors and teachers? You know what I mean? Like, hey, can we get all the veterinarians and farmers as well together and start teaching people some of these skills, right? Like, I mean, that's, you would think that would be a given. I would do that. I'd get people together like, listen, guys, I know there's 18 of us. Listen, you know how to fix cars. You know how to do that. You need to start teaching all of us. You know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, that's like a basic. Like, why would you go around just shooting people? Human beings are literally your most valuable asset, and you're going to kill them all. But anyway, going on with Bray's comment, yeah, is that there seems to not be a single rational person within them. A society can't be consisting entirely of war, slaughter, blood. Someone has to do the plumbing. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Somebody's got to come up with, how do you clean water? Lindell's like, what? You mean there isn't cans of food everywhere? Yeah, I know. That always seems to be the thing. Well, listen, I think you'll still have hoarders. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like all of those warehouses for those big box stores that have thousands of tonnages of canned goods. Of course, you're going to have those people, but there's when the population goes down, you can still farm land. It's still there, right? Unless it's irradiated or something, I guess. A underscore says Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas did a pretty good job at showing how society progressed and agriculture evolved. Fallout 3 and 4 completely ignores all such things and have people raid the local mall for 200 years. Yeah. Some would say that if society, quote unquote, fell today, that we would just rebuild ourselves within 5 years, that we would just, there would be, some would claim that there's just far too many intelligent people to reestablish a new society far sooner than we would, because most post-apocalyptic worlds are like, they've been happening for generations and no one remembers the old times and stuff. And you're just like, no, you could read a book and the stuff still exists. It's not like every car stopped moving and now no one knows how to fix them. It's like, no, there's CNC machines and oil and people that are pretty good at building stuff on their own, that they would bring society back together again. But listen, I'm a lover of post-apocalyptic stories myself, so yeah, I look the other way. Mike says, hell, ask yourself how the fuck the staff of a Star Wars Imperial cruiser fed themselves. Yeah, I don't know how they did that. The last people to eat in Star Wars were drinking blue milk on Tatooine. You know what? They also don't show you the bathrooms, but maybe they don't have to do that. Anyway, there's some funny Kylo Ren cafeteria comedy skits that are pretty good. Stormtroopers hanging out. Oh, the Mandalorian. Well, no, they were always in a cantina. Ah, yeah, you're right. But yeah, the Mandalorian, they were in they were stormtrooper officials or whatever in a cantina with their helmets off and stuff like that. Yeah. So Brayton says, yeah, adaptation after society's end is a big deal. I'm writing some lore for a post-apocalyptic tabletop game, and I shit you not, at least 3 whole pages out of the 20-page lore I need to write are dedicated solely to agriculture, adaptation of medicine, and it didn't. Okay, and adaptation of medicine and water purification. Yeah, what is it? You take a bucket, you fill it with different layers of carbon and sand, and then you dribble water, dirty water through it to come out the bottom of something like that. Something is there's something there's a I don't want to say easy. There is a method of getting clean water that way. I think another way of doing it is plastic tarping over a bucket with high humidity, and then the good water flows to the middle part of the tarp to drip into it. It's something like that. Um, you guys are so silly. Guys talking together. Okay, Mad Max game. The full health pickups were either years old open cans of dog food or maggots from corpse farms. Ugh, corpse farms. Ugh. That's pretty nasty. Mike says if society fell today, it would take longer than 5 years to rebuild. Why? We can't even agree if science is real. For fuck's sake. Yeah, yeah. Well, I hate to say this. Maybe the good part is that part of the population would fade away. uh, that's kind of like my opinion on like racism here in the States. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Live long enough, you'll die off. So hopefully that'll happen. Sorry, but true. Yeah. Pelor says filter and boil. Filter and boil would get you pretty clean water too. Yeah, you don't really see too much of that. Yeah, Ahsoka. Mandalorian changed my word for egg. Ahsoka. Yeah. Did you see that? You see that nasty egg that they got? Anyway, oh man, it's pretty bad. But looked like a hell of a lot of fun. But ooh, is my camera do? Yeah, it's. I realize my camera's trying to focus on me or the mind flare. Is it the mind flare? Yeah. Just being silly. Anyway, um, I, lastly, really, I wasn't trying to. I was trying to bring up some gender politics, but in the case of like what I love about genetic fiction is just that we have a way, like in a post-apocalypse setting, like you're writing there, as well, Bray. Like we can take a look at things and go, if this happened, what would if then, right? Would there be people who want to hold on the old ways? Sure, and we write that down. Would there people who want to embrace the new way? Yes, write that down. How violent would they be? How supportive? How much would they ostracize or embrace the new regime? And to what extent? I mean, there are people, remember, there are always people who are, no matter whether you are pro or against, anti anything, there's always those extremists on either ends that the people that are flow towards the middle just shake their heads like, don't, oh, please stop, because it's, even though we don't want to admit it, we all know there's always somebody that takes something too far. Look at any sporting event. When your favorite team A wins, A or loses, there's always at least one person who takes that win or loss and does something and goes a little bit too far. And you're just like, why did you try to flip the police car over? Why did you climb up on the telephone pole? You just like, why did you run out naked on the field? Like, really? Did you really have to do that? Like, really? Like, we're all enjoying it, and then one person ruins it for everybody. And then, Bray says, genetics in post-apoc is a very interesting topic. Not only do the gender relationships change drastically, but the type of apocalypse also influences heavily to what extent and in which way the changes happen. Exactly. Like, for example, let's go back to why the last man. All right. So if there's some kind of fertility problem, does it become Handmaid's Tale, where society starts to corral the women and force them socially to become breeding mares and cattle, or do the women jump? Or is there a faction of women that jump up the food chain and go, "Hey, you need something? You better come to me. What do you have to give me to allow your society to keep growing, right?" And then and the disruptors in between that, like for example, in The Handmaid's Tale, there was a guy who, on paper, created Gilead, but it started driving him and his wife insane when it was done in practice. So on paper, it was just like, oh, well, this is how it would make sense if we did this. But then when it was done in practice, he was just like, holy shit. And then the hypocrisy of the people that were into the Gilead and the Handmaid's Tale, the hypocrisy was half the people in it, in public, they're all like, yeah, sure, buttoned up, wearing a different colored outfits, and they're just like, yeah, but behind closed doors, they're like, hell no, I want to do my own thing, and that happens a lot in society where people outwardly embrace one thing, but inwardly they're like, I'm not down for this. I'm not down for it at all. I'll break a law in a minute, right? You know what I mean? It's the I'm for law and order, and they're busy growing weed in their backyard because they want to get out on the back porch and smoke it. And they're just like that's illegal. Well, for me it isn't. I'm like, well, okay, so here we go with the asterisks again, right? Mike says apocalypse via radiation could plausibly affect the genetic code of humanity. Yes. The idea of our code being changed such that standard reproduction might be hampered is logical. Would a society try to clone, or would it try to genetically recreate a fertile version of one sex or another? And let's think about scarcity. Somebody, okay, one person will go, you know what? I have a cure for this. We can do cloning. We have exo wombs and embryo sacs and blah blah blah. We've got, hey, we can send troops in to save the labs with the sperm, and then you're going to have somebody go, we could give this out, but why should we? Why don't we create artificial scarcity? Somebody's going to do that. All right, Bray says. Brayton says, my apocalypse, for example, is of a certain type that forces society to standardize and militarize heavily, which doesn't let that many women actually be on the front lines. Okay. However, because the pre-apoc tech is much more adaptable to women thanks to the XX chromosomes, there are big considerations if to use a woman for cybernetic enhancements or not. And since technology has taken a big hit, there's no good way to test for fertility. Ooh, ouch. Now, you could have, like, what I think you're getting at here, what you could have is a gender separation because of necessity, like a post-apoc region where the necessity causes the separation, even if the people don't prefer it that way. And so, hell, that transformation happened here in the States, at least, where so many men went off to work that women were starting to get into the work field, and there was cultural tension there. Like, hey, women shouldn't be going to the factories, but we need you. And then everybody knows the poster, Rosie the Riveter, right? You start putting out the posters, and it started making people think of things. And even today, there are YouTube channels dedicated to the what's the way to say this? Dedicated to the idea that women have progressed so much that they are becoming the men that they hate in many ways. And so you could have that flip flop of like in Brayton's world. I'm not saying this is happening in your world, but you could have so many men go off to war that the women are back home, and then they become the political leaders, they become the geneticists, they become the cybernetically enhanced. And so when the guys come back and they're like war ravaged and stuff, they come back and they might have to, kowtow to the leadership because hey, that's just the way things are. And like we brought up the Western show Godless, if all the guys are dead, because women are going to have to step up. And like why the last man brought this up, if you're a prony and you vacillate on the spectrum, where do you fit in? And with science fiction, of course, when you have um, easy genetic manipulation, with transhumanism, you have cortical stacks and body modifications, and like in Eclipse Phase, you have there's literally a morph called a doll, which can easily change its gender, over a short period of time by choice. You have the idea of being able to sleeve into different bodies, and how serious or how relatable is that? If you could choose to be any gender you want, even for the weekend, maybe even having that choice itself is a choice that lets other people know who and what you are. So maybe this is kind of a strange thing to think about in, say, Altered Carbon or Eclipse Phase, where people can sleeve into different bodies. Maybe all the pronies and women sleeve into men's bodies, not not necessarily to fit in, but because it's tradition, almost like wearing a business suit, except you're wearing a male body, and it's like maybe that just becomes a regular thing, and then maybe somebody else on the other end is like, I don't understand why women aren't empowered, and the women like we are, we just go off to work, I slip into the body, and I'm at, and then you could have conflict that way as well. And if you're someone who, like for example, if you are on the spectrum, I'm calling it spectrum. I know I'm using terminology. It's probably offensive to somebody out there, but I mean it. Like if you sexually or genetically feel like you run a gambit on a spectrum, and to be honest, most of us actually do run a spectrum. We're not usually one or the other. It it would be pretty interesting to have certain jobs or factions or even locations be culturally accepted to be a specific style of gender. Like for example, maybe there's a guild of like space navigators or something, and there's a guild of like slingship pilots, and all slingship pilots are asexual. Maybe that's just a thing. Much like in Mike Gould's world, where there are people that wear these masks to make themselves faceless and genderless. Maybe there is a need or desire, even culturally, for people. Maybe police forces are like that, where they are genderless unless the need is for detectives to be genderfied, to insinuate themselves into particular regions or something like that. Like maybe if there's children, the police force is like, okay, well, we're going to need to send 3 female gendered officers to deal with this thing because historically maybe children are just more at ease around the female genetic form than the male genetic form, and that might just be an accepted thing. I don't know. And you could play with it again. We're talking speculation, so there's always ways to say what we think it could be, what we think it should be, what the things that the opposite of it, the people who would be against it, and the monkey wrench is thrown into it too. Because even if it's something is temporary, like, oh, you know, an all male society wouldn't exist. Well, maybe it might exist, but maybe for a very short amount of time, right? Yeah. Oh, hell's yeah. Yeah, Brave's like, there are a shitload of options to play it out in conclusion. Yeah, yeah. My thing is like, is don't throw away the baby with the bathwater, right? Like there are, I think sometimes we're so brilliant that we try to get to the end of the equation as opposed to playing around with our ability to navigate through the equation in the first place. And to all, like, I mean, like we brought that up already. Like, well, it doesn't make sense for there to be a 200-year-old post-apocalyptic world. Well, and we're thinking, well, common sense wise, yeah, they're going to be rational people. Society will try to rebuild itself. there's going to be all of that. But do we like bald headed, war boys running around? I kind of like the faceless armies. I kind of like the the cannibals. Kind of like it, you know. Yeah, common sense tells us one thing, but if you're a video game programmer, we need people to shoot. Brayton says one of the most esteemed elite units in that world is actually a small platoon of entirely cybernetically enhanced women, but an almost complete majority of the regular guards and elite soldiers are men, with some women who have lost their ability to have children thanks to various reasons. That's another great reason how women would fit into particular cultures, especially when populations start dropping down due to outside like radiation or World War III or nanotech or meteor strikes or these intergalactic wars or something. Unfortunately, if they can't, if the only way to procreate is traditional male woman, uh, man and a woman have a child together, and they can't procreate, maybe putting them on the front lines might be the thing to do. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Although, shit, what did they do in Handmaid's Tale? They were known as Marthas. They were like cooks, cooks and cleaners and stuff. And they dressed differently than the handmaids who wore red, and the Marthas wore like an army green or grayish green kind of thing. Anyway, but yes, absolutely. Also, it does bring to light because a lot of times when we think about this, like going back to Why the Last Man and Handmaid's Tale and stuff, Children of Men, we consider, since women, we know in our society genetically are the ones that give birth to children. In the future, there's the book I've called Idoru. No, that's William Gibson. Anyway, there was one where men were having children. They would have they they could just genetically insert a womb inside the man's body, and no, it didn't come out the penile hole. They were cesarean births, but there were men that were carrying around children, and there was a part of the story was one of the men had one of the embryo had to get the embryos and inserted them inside of himself with a little micro womb that was going to grow, and so he was on the run, and it was a little bit of a lone wolf and cub kind of story, but I can't remember the writer to that story. But I mean, there's a lot of that as well. Or you could have an underground. Imagine having like an altered carbon styled underground where there are someone has female bodies to allow others to sleeve into them to become and experience the ability to for childbirth, and that the unfortunate, because this is altered carbon, so the bodies are used as birthing instruments, but people could sleeve into them as like a almost like an experiential vacation of sorts. Or heck, there might be a lot of men who are like, I don't want to be on the friggin' front lines in a war, in some intergalactic war fighting. I don't want to be a SeaTac agent anymore. I'm gonna sleeve it to a woman to get the hell out of here and slide in the background. How many action movies have we seen the Maverick cops jump into to fight the drug dealers, and what do they do? Scantily clad women. Here, get your clothes and run. Do they ever look at the ladies? They're just like they're basically eye candy, right? But no one knows if any of those women were like badass assassins or something. They're just like, ladies, get out. Men, let's have a gunfight. Right? Yeah. Oh man. Mm-mm-mm. I'll get to your comment there, Mike, in a minute. Brayton says, yeah, in the future, children might be developed entirely artificially. Yep. Warhammer 40K made a note of it, including tech called Vetawombs in several stories in which children are developed much more quickly and entirely artificially. Yeah, and in the Matrix, absolutely. Matrix showed infants being grown and fed by robots. They literally showed us a baby in Bacta gel or something like that with cords stuck in its mouth and body. Pretty nasty stuff there. But yeah, and if they're grown artificially, do we really need gender anymore? Really? And what does a family unit look like? Like everyone grown in your creche of Vita tanks, are they your family? Like, oh, me and my 37 siblings were born and raised in Sector 370Z, level 1552 or something. You know what I mean? Like, your last name might be a number letter code, and everyone there feels like they're somehow connected to each other. That might be a thing. Mike says BattleTech clans had a eugenics program where certain warriors were literally grown in vats. Yeah, eugenics. Oof, oof, oof. Trueborn were grown artificially, where freeborn were made the old-fashioned way in the backseat of a car. Space Above and Beyond had tank grown warriors too. They sure did. They sure did. Space Above and Beyond. Yeah. Yeah. And that brings up its own issue, right? Like, if someone can vat grow people, who decides what the vat grown people are going to be like? Both first genetically, do you genetically grow specifically men and women, or something that's vacillates somewhere on the spectrum in between, or some choices in between where they get to choose? And mentally, how are they grown? Is are they given artificial memories from their rapid growth through a series of, like, oh, here's a card for tape number 2. Let's insert the card, and this gives them, exactly 18 years and 6 months of life that was taken off of a shelf. Or would these be clans of sorts, where the clans get to choose? We need 6 men and 12 women for our new clan, as you're going through deep space, and they're grown in vats or something like that. Maybe you are, much like passing down someone's legacy in the olden days. I'm passing my sword on to you. Maybe you're given the genetic material of the person who was before you. And so there's a line of 18 individuals that you look exactly like, and you're expected to take on the mantle of the people that came before you, even though technically they're your siblings. They are technically your ancestors. They are temporally your ancestors, genetically your siblings, or something. Like, that would be pretty fascinating too. Kurt Russell Soldier, wow, dude, you went back in the day. Kurt Russell Soldier addressed Indoctrinated Warriors version, Vat Grown One, and Vat Grown Ones too. Yes, for those who don't know, that's an oldie but goodie. Little low budget, but Kurt Russell's soldier was an indoctrinated soldier, and then did battle with a vat grown soldier, which was better than him. And then, what was it? The soldier was dumped on the trash planet, and somehow he survives on the trash planet. And it's kind of funny because he's such a soldier. He calls everybody like sir and ma'am, and like, it's pretty cool. It's a You think he's portraying a robot, but it's actually quite subtle. It's a pretty good movie. Pretty good movie. Uh, Bray says, speaking of which, artificially made humans are actually much more advantageous to a sci-fi society, because you could genetically condition them for certain things. It will never be accurate or have 100% success just because of the way genetics work. But tank divers could be conditioned from the embryo to do that job, for example. Yes. Now, the argument would be, um, you'll have from some people would be, in our society, we have people born with, I'll call, deficiencies. Not necessarily handicap, but, like, okay, take me for instance. I'm short and stubby, right? I'm more round than a little bit. And bad eyesight, diabetes, whatever, probably other things going on, right? So genetically, I'm no condition to, I'm very, very much below the upper 95 percentile. Some people would argue with that fact that there are people like in Gattaca who, given their condition, can push themselves beyond what we expect them to be. So, what you're talking about, Brayton, might be true, but it also might have that aspect of not being true at the exact same time. So, you could breed people who are like deep sea divers, um, high altitude individuals, people who need less sleep, have extreme endurance, excellent eyesight, um, improved balance and hand-eye coordination, enhanced memory, and all that kind of stuff. But you're always going to have a bit of the natural-born society who, on paper, is lesser in every way, who might meet and exceed those individuals. So you don't know, and that's actually kind of where Gattaca kind of shines, and I kind of like it. I like that they do that. Yeah, I try. I would bring up your comment, but it just won't. The whole thing just won't show there. Too. Oh man, like Michael says, Blade Runner. When androids are so real that that they fear death, what makes humanity unique? How was that addressed by giving androids an expiry date? It's so wrong. Yeah, yeah, and how nasty is that of humanity to give a thing life, to just tell it, yeah, but we don't need you that long. Yeah, we forget that in Blade Runner, the androids, the replicants, were created to serve man off planet, and they were given an expiration date. Pretty nasty. Mm-mm-mm. Which unfortunately giving them an expiration date gave them mortality and made them think about their lives, like the journey of their lives to their end and whatnot. Mike says, here's a question. Where did the babies come from in Matrix when we see the humans in tubes? See, listen, okay, if you're gonna do that, I'm gonna assume that they can come from either it seems like, and I'm just making this up, with the Matrix 4 trailer that just dropped online. Go ahead and watch it. Go ahead and leave the show. Go ahead and watch it, and then come back. Um, I'm going to assume that the Matrix organization has the genetic material of specified human beings in the Matrix that also exist outside the Matrix, and when the humans die, they just insert that genetic material and grow another baby. So, like Neo has existed for various iterations because there's always a new Neo they're going to create when the old Neo dies, and so on and so forth. That's what I'm guessing at. I don't think they're taken out of the wombs of living people. I think it is a. I think that's how we're going to explain how there's a new or slightly different Trinity and Morpheus, and I think that's how they're going to explain it. But I'm pulling that out of my ass, so I don't know. Anyway, you can hear my voice going. Sorry. Mike says, again, Battletech clans had massive soldiers called elementals who were bred for battle armor. They bred special breeds for pilots and such too. This sounds very much because like what Brayton was talking about in terms of like breeding, we could genetically modify people to have certain abilities and conditions to specify them for certain jobs. And they kind of hinted at that with the Man of Steel movie when on Krypton, where they had like what was it, like scientists, warriors, and politicians, and they'd only had like three, whatever. Kind of too simplistic in my opinion. But going back to Brayton's idea of genetically modifying people, it could be that if people are created and modified for certain jobs, they're expected to do those jobs. Hey, you're supposed to be a deep sea landline fiber optics cable worker. Why are you studying piano? Right? And that person's like, but I like piano and I like the artistry of it. I mean, that might be the case. Braden says that tech would be so advanced that by the time it comes around, enough time would have passed for society to drastically change. By that time, even stuff like the Geneva Convention would have become forgotten to allow for tech like neurotoxin ammunition. Oh, what else we got here? And explosive, non-penetrating toxic ammunition to exist. Now, see, you're going into you looking at you directly. You, um, you are a armchair transhumanist like the rest of us, meaning like today I'd have brought up the idea of genetic fiction, right? Like one thing changes. But when it comes to transhumanism, it's the idea that everything moves at an exponential rate to the point where, because a lot of fiction deals with one thing. Oh, what if we had faster than light travel? And most everything doesn't change. What if we had replicants and most other things don't change much? What if we had, why the last man? What if all the men died and things don't change much after that? What if and but when everything starts changing, faster computers, uplifted animals, AI, genetic modification, nanotechnology, all those kind of things start expanding themselves. A lot of the questions come in like, wait a minute, if they have the ability to download their brains into cortical stacks, why wouldn't they have the ability to, and you start questioning everything else. And I like that. I like the idea of like, wait a minute, if they can engineer people in tubes, why wouldn't this other thing disappear or change or modify or whatever? And so yeah, I love I love that thinking. Now, in defense of the people who are writers, script writers, movies, comic books, graphic novels, sometimes you just want one ask, right? You want to ask the public, listen, in this world, we've uplifted animals to sentience, and that's it. And that's the one ask you ask of your fans, and your fans go, okay, I'll go along with that. And then you read the story or you watch the movie or whatever. And because it can be very difficult to embrace um, too many new things too quickly, too often, right? Like if we today are as different as the people from 200 years ago, if we advanced everything 200 years from this moment today into the future, we may not recognize those people. We may become what's one of the Fermi paradox things from a science and futurism. We may become our own aliens. If we spread throughout the galaxy, we may genetically diversify ourselves so much that we become our own aliens. As a matter of fact, we may not even reach the Oort cloud. By the time we reach the Oort cloud in a reliable manner with humanity, we may not know what humanity is any longer. And I love that stuff. I kind of Brayton's like, I'm very thorough with my sci-fi. Whenever I write even a small idea, I proceed to write an entire web of connectivity of how something influences something else. Now, I will, not you. This I've been picking with you. I'm not picking with you now, but I'm picking with you in terms of picking with everybody else because you're doing something that I think other people don't do, and that is be careful of, again, going to the end of the equation, meaning like um, just because something makes logical sense doesn't mean people are going to make the logical decision. Um, Religion, panic, fear, politics, economics, hell, even race and culture and language and space, a distance, all have effects on how people embrace something. Like, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, we're tabletop role players, right? And in Dungeons and Dragons, the minute somebody brings up firearms in Dungeons and Dragons, somebody always throws their hands up and go, well, if there's firearms, there's no reason to have anything else, right? But in our own world, without magic, it took a couple hundred years before firearms really became a thing. So while, for example, cybernetics, genetic modification, faster than light travel, AI systems, uplifted animals, so on and so forth, nano neurotoxins that are specified to kill only people with blue eyes and all this other kind of stuff, that stuff may exist, but it might not be ubiquitous. There may be a reason why people don't use faster than light communications. There may be a reason why cybernetics is outlawed in a particular place, right? Even if it makes their lives better, we as human beings do dumb things, and not because it makes sense, but because we don't want to change our culture. We hold tooth and nail. Don't move my cheese, right? Don't move my cheese. Don't change the way I look at the world. When I'll give an example, uh, like okay, it took us a year and a half to get used to the fact that we no longer needed to work in an office. And look at that fight, right? Like many people realized office buildings are like phallic monuments to bosses, not to workers. So yeah. Oh, I'm with you there. But Brayton's like Blomkamp is a massive inspiration to me in that sense. Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, great ideas. Maybe like Chappie wasn't the best, but I liked Elysium more than most people, and everybody loves District 9. But yeah, yeah. Mike says, I'm not so sure we're that different from 200 years ago. Our language has changed, and some embrace science, and some embrace science. After that, don't know. I think it's small things. Like when I say small things, we take it for granted, but I think 200 years ago they wouldn't. Airplanes, cell phones, automobiles, um, material materials that we use, Gorilla Glass, plastics and aluminums and things like that, ink pens. I think though collectively all together, it makes us look alien from 200 years ago, even though today we look back and go, nah, well, we were doing the same things, just maybe slower and with different materials. And even today, there are people who are not supporters. They are historically trying to preserve all of our ancient things. So yeah, yeah, yeah. I the people not embracing science to me is kind of funny. It's very hilarious. Michael says, to be fair, I tend to be like Brayton too. I get noodly when it comes to how my cultures evolve. Listen, I'm going to put this out there. This isn't a promotion for it. This is actually more of a punishment. If you go to World Anvil, I know you guys know there's a ton. I can start naming them all off, right? Obsidian Portal and Mythweaver, what all these other places that have digital assets for you to create and wiki pages and things like personal wiki pages to create your worlds. Excuse me, you can see my voice is starting to go. I apologize. World Anvil broke me, and I think you guys are detailed. I think I might be wrong, but I think I could put money on it. If you go to World Anvil and start going through all the different things on World Anvil and realize what World Anvil has and how deep you can get into World Anvil and how it links back and does timelines and links back and the questions that it asks, I think it would break you. I dare say it would break you. Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's that detailed. World Anvil is super world buildery. What what would be the disease of world builder syndrome? Uh, World builderphilia, an addiction to world building, world builderphilia, world buildercosis, buildicosis. I don't know. Brayton says in every century there are certain advancements that drastically change society. In the 20th century, it was penicillin. Yeah, the computer and the agriculture reformation. In the 19th century, it was the steam engine and the train. Um, I think you could fit factory in there somewhere. The idea of like a person making a small piece to be later built into bigger pieces. I think factories probably fit in there. Damn, but steam engines and trains, yeah, yeah. I even had a sorry, I'm going to give this away. I even had a role playing idea of having those transformative things more than just transform society, but they become like an I want to say I'll call it arcane focus, but that's not what I'm talking about. That like the world becomes like trains and like airships and steam engines and stuff become. It was kind of steampunky, but yeah, I was like that would become the new thing, and I was like that would be cool to have a world filled like that. There's an old miniatures game called Crimson Skies that I really wished became a role playing setting of airplanes. The highway system never existed. Uh, the United States fell. The highway system never existed back in the 1920s after the Depression. It split up into the Empire State, Hollywood, Texas, Mexarkana, the Sioux Nation. I forget what Florida and the rest. I can't remember what that was called. Anyway, and then all the miniatures and the people in it were you flew in biplanes and airplanes and airships and floating dirigibles and stuff like. Anyway, it was really cool idea. Mike says in some ways we've improved in race relations and sexual identity, but I promise you, we had plastics and jet planes earlier. We'd still be promise you, if we had plastics and jet planes earlier, we'd still be a world of assholes arguing whether pink is feminine. Yeah. There's a very interesting scene in the television show 4400 where a guy taken from like the 1930s or 40s, black gentleman, gets snatched by aliens, comes back with the 4400, and he was going to Mahershala Ali was the actor, and he was going to leave and go to Canada with a white woman. He comes back and he meets the granddaughter, who of course looks exactly like her. And she comes to meet him because she found stuff about her grandmother and was like, hey, I'm going to meet this guy because my grandmother had all these hidden notes and love letters and things like that. So they meet together and she takes him out to a diner, and he goes into the diner and he's wildly amazed because it's so open. People have different like piercings and colored hair and different races and stuff like that. He's like, wow, the world's better. And then he pulls out a pack of cigarettes and gets ready to light up, and everybody looks at him like, there's no smoking in here. And he kind of makes a comment like, more things change and more they stay the same. And it was pretty funny. I mean, I get the point of like the smoking, but there was a period of time where everybody smoked. It was pretty fun. Pelora mentions the system I use. I made custom categories that are about a quarter the size of the defaults. Did I miss something? I'm confused. I missed a comment by you there, P. Shit. I'm gonna have to visit you, P. Give you a big old hug. Go across the pond or something. I mean, that might be a good excuse. I'm gonna keep that as. Oh, World Anvil. Thank you. Jesus, where's my button? Okay. So World Anvil, but not World Anvil. So Pelora is bringing up the fact that where she says, the system I use made custom categories that are about a quarter the size of the defaults, talking about World Anvil, because World Anvil will take you down a rabbit hole that is pretty damn deep. It's crazy deep. Oh man. I should bring it up, but anyway, Brayton says, I was that 14-year-old kid who was sitting in the corner of the classroom during recess with a 2,000-page book. I would be fine with the World Anvil timeline. Yeah, I was that kid too. Yeah, yeah, I was. Listen, there were plenty of times where I got one of those hall passes because I got done early in the class, and the teacher would just give me their like teacher's book and was like, here, just read this, and I was that kid. Yeah, I had fun reading dictionaries and encyclopedias and thesauruses and stuff like that. I don't know how I had. Today I can't tell you how I had fun reading dictionaries, but I don't know. I loved it. I don't know why. It was just something. It was a new world. Mike says Sliders addressed worlds where this one thing changed. I love that show, Sliders. That could do a reboot. Anyway, Sliders addressed worlds where this one thing changed. There was a world stuck in World War II tech because this world had no titanium. Ooh, Sliders. that would be an interesting RPG, if a little bit daunting to do. Uh, I believe GURPS has one called GURPS Timeline, where it's about time travel, and the GURPS book supplement is about like it's about it's about what if different things had or had not happened in society. Like for example, one was and if I'm remembering this off the top of my head, pulling out of my ass too. What if the European expansion hadn't happened? Another one was what if it wasn't Thomas Jefferson but Tesla's ideas that expanded? I think another one was what if the 13 colonies never expanded past their something like it was a bunch of little things that would change out time and stuff. I would love to play in the sliders because of course the first part is how is the world different, and then how do you navigate in this new world where this thing is different, like titanium didn't exist, or maybe a certain inventor didn't invent it yet or discover it yet or something like that. Sorry. Brayton says for me it was Jules Verne collections and Uncle Tom's Hut. For me, it was Isaac Asimov, and it was a ton of Isaac Asimov. And what was the short story? It there were these small magazines. They don't exist any longer. Isaac Asimov had one, and there was one called I think it was just called science fiction or science fantasy or something. There were a ton of those. Anyway, our library at the school had them, and they were just tucked in the corner. And I just would dive down deep into those things. I promised to bring that book. Fuck. I promised to bring the book with the short stories in it, and I didn't do that. And I promised to do it. All right, guys, I'm a half hour past my normal time. Um, I'm getting pretty bad here. Brayton's like, yeah, my parents wanted me to grow up with the classics. It's because of those old books that to this day half my wardrobe is dedicated to a 300 book library. Half my wardrobe. Yeah, sorry, I got an image, and then I like that image. I'm just imagining uh, books hanging in a wardrobe like you would hang your clothes. I know what you mean, but sorry, I got another image, and I love it so much. Um, yeah, I haven't read the classics lately, but I remember reading a ton of classics, a ton of strangely sci-fi fantasy classics. There's a lot of it out there. It's crazy. Mufa, what's going on there? Wow. I got in trouble in literature class in high school for reading unassigned books and making the teacher look bad. Ooh, when I knew more about the assigned reading for the year that I completed in week one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that little comment. Yeah, move for tactical. Oof, detected. Oof. Yeah, making a teacher look bad because you actually read the material. Oh man, oh my god. Yeah, they refused to believe I had read all the books on the reading list already. I know. That's well. Listen, I don't want anybody else to hear this. Sometimes we're surrounded by idiots. And they have to lowest common denominator all that stuff, right? So yeah, they're not going to believe you because they're like, listen, half these kids they ain't even trying to read one of the books, and we've got 20 on the list. But see, I was that kid that loved reading that stuff, and unfortunately, I'm a man of a certain age that has read so much that I probably forgot more than I've read, and I've probably read far more than because you guys are about the same age that than most people. Oh no! Sorry, mind flare. Dice holder got me. All right, guys. Michael Mensch takes us out with Rod Eternal, Shiny, and Chromium Alloy derivative in this particular timeline. Guys, have a great one out there. If you have Disney Plus, or you're going to get it. I think they've released it pretty much worldwide now. Please watch the What If series. I think it's funny. I think some people are making too much of a big deal about it. Um, these are just fun one offs. I don't think we're going to revisit these one-off worlds by the Watcher ever again. Uatu, the Watcher. But everybody, take care. You're so silly. I need to hear "Man of a Certain Age" sung like "Man of Constant Sorrow." No, no, no. You're not going to get too much music out of me. Palora, have a great one. Everybody, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for even sticking around this much longer out after the end of the show. But again, thank you so much. Hopefully there will be some new stuff in the coming weeks. I have plans. Just right now, I'm feeling it in my chest. So have a great one. Have a great weekend. I will see thee later. Thank you there, Bray. And by the way, Bray, thank you very much for just popping in. And as usual, amongst all of you, this channel only works with you guys because you make me look smart because I'm I'm not that smart. I'm just a facilitator, so I really appreciate it, guys. Have a great one. I will see thee later. Peace.